everybody, and welcome back to another JRPG Report Sunday special. And this is a new concept that I'm trying out. And I figured I would have on listeners and friends to ask them about what are their favorite top 10 JRPGs that they have ever played. And to start us all off, we have got Jake, my good sir. Jake, introduce yourself. How are you doing, my good sir?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I am doing well, man. I spent my morning doing a bunch of yard work, dragging trees and stuff, so my body is very tired, but mentally I am here and ready to do this.
There you go. It's good to be back on the podcast. It's been a while.
Yeah, man. It's good to have you on. You know, I've been trying to carve out time to do more things like this, and now it's kind of like a blessing and a curse. It's like now that I'm out of work, I have more time to do things like this while I'm searching for jobs. So I'm happy that we could do this, because I think the last time you were on was with James, and that was a while ago now.
Yeah, I think the last one I did was deep dive into one of the Trails games.
Ah, the Trails games. I just messaged one of my buddies from the Steam machine today, and I said, hey man, while we're playing a couple short games over the next month or two, you should play second chapter so we can move on to the third, or I'm going to play it without you.
Oh yeah, can't recommend them enough.
Yeah,
actually, when I was making out my list to record this episode, I kind of made a little rule for myself to only pick one game per franchise. Otherwise, minus one game at the top of the list, I would have picked all Trails games.
I mean, they are good, man. First chapter and second chapter of Trails in the Sky was some of the best storytelling that I've ever experienced in a game, and I am just ready for more of it. Yeah,
I mean, the storytelling stays very strong the entire way through. So,
I mean, to the point that on my handheld that I have the original Legend of Heroes games, like Tale of Vermilion, I think is one of, or Tear of Vermilion, however you pronounce it.
Yep, I've got all three of those originals on PSP.
Yeah, man, and I haven't gotten around to them, but I look at them and I'm like, I need to carve out time for you. This goes back to time, like to find that resource, man.
Yeah, I've only played one of them, the Tear of Vermilion. I played that and I beat that, but I never fired up the other two. I think I played Tear of Vermilion during COVID.
Would you say that it holds up enough that like it's worth checking out?
I mean, I liked it. It's very old, so it's not like the Sky games. I mean, those are old too, but this is way older than that. Yeah. I mean, it's good. It's still got, it's got a decent story. It's got hidden stuff, kind of like Trails in the Sky does. So, I mean, yeah, it's definitely worth giving a shot. But now the issue is going to be finding them.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you look them up now. I mean, you'll pay probably $80+ for each one.
Yeah, and in those situations, I tell people, like, if you have to, just emulate it if you want to play it, because I don't think the company's making money off those games anymore. So, like, but if you can get your hand on a physical copy, that's even better, though, to just be able to hold it in your hand and be like, dude, I have history here.
Yep.
So I totally get both sides of it. But, it's like when people tell me, man, I'd really like to check out X Nintendo game, but it's $3,000. I'm like, man, you could probably find a ROM of it for free and not pay a scalper price for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of the games have been a little easy, like the older ones, they've been a little easier to get nowadays because they re-release them on, PS Store or Nintendo eShop or something like that.
Yeah, always love that.
The games that they don't do that for, like the old Legend of Heroes games, the original three, those will cost you a fortune.
Yeah, and it's only getting more expensive. Like, I have a copy of Chrono Trigger for the DS, and that thing just keeps getting worth more and more. And I'm like, I don't know why. I mean, I know it's a great game, but like the DS version, I guess people really like that version. I do. I mean, it's the definitive edition in my opinion, but
I do have that one on the DS. That is the only version that I actually played.
Yeah.
I have the original. I have I think it was Final Fantasy Chronicles, where it was released alongside Final Fantasy IV and Chrono Trigger within the same package.
On PS1, right?
Yeah. But I never played that one. I did get it on the DS and played it. It is not on my list. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I played it on the DS first, and then I ended up getting it on Steam and played it and beat it that way. I think I beat it. I don't know. I'm so bad at not beating games. Like, I get to the very end, and then I'm like, I don't want this to end, so I just don't. I'm getting better about that, though. I'm getting better about that.
Yeah. Well, when we get to my list, we'll talk about Chrono Trigger a little bit in conjunction with one of the ones on my list, and I'll probably commit a JRPG crime by talking about Chrono Trigger on it, but we'll get there.
Well, speaking of your list, my good sir, are they in any particular order?
I did kind of rank them 10 through 1. I had a hard time filling out a full 10 just because some of the ones at the bottom could have easily been swapped out with some others. So the bottom ones aren't really in any particular order. But as we get more towards the top, I do have them, ranked pretty solid.
All right, then, man. Well, then let's start with your number 10. What you got, sir?
So the 10th one I put on the list was Golden Sun. That one was released back on, I want to say, the Game Boy Color.
I believe
I might,
yeah.
Yeah, I might have that wrong, but yeah, one of the Game Boys anyway. They had Golden Sun, the original, Golden Sun 2, The Lost Age, and then they came out with a third game that they put on the DS. They were all good. It's a good series as a whole, so I put that one out there to fill out the bottom of the list.
Now, Golden Sun, would you say that that's a game that holds up today, or is it one that's kind of its time? Because I know some JRPGs have aged better than others. So
I mean, it kind of depends on what kind of a JRPG fan you are. So for me, you're going to see a lot of the ones on this list are older. I mean, I'm in my mid 30s now, so I've been playing JRPGs for over 25 years, and the newer games that come out. I mean, I'm a sucker for the older stuff. Most JRPGs, they kind of move away from strictly turn-based, and I'm more of a fan of the old school stuff. So for me, yes, Golden Sun would hold up. You'll also probably notice I'm kind of a sucker for elements. So Golden Sun has, a lot of it is tied to earth, fire, air, and water. Okay, and you'll see that with a few of these on here. So, I mean, that's something that I really liked about the game. You go around finding a bunch of, they call them Jin in that game. So, you find, I think there's like 8 different earth Jin, 8 different fire ones, same for water and air. And, when you find them, you get stronger. A lot of it is tied, to the magic and the elements that get stronger. And then if you choose to mix and match the Jin, on particular characters, they kind of get different spells and abilities, which is pretty cool. And the story that goes through all 3 is really good too.
That was my next question. Is that like the thing that always attracts me to games most is their storytelling.
Same here.
And when a game can especially when you get, a series that tells a story over multiple games, if they can nail that properly, it is always so good. Yeah.
So Golden Sun does that really well. The first game follows Isaac and a group of his friends. And, there's a group of antagonists that you are chasing after throughout the game. And then when you get to Golden Sun 2, the point of view switches to one of the antagonists. And there was a kidnapped character in the first Golden Sun, and she is a main party member in the second one as well. So it's really cool how it flips the narrative as the story progresses.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna put that on my list of games to check out while I'm, on my handheld laying in bed at night, because I'm all for it. Elements, yeah. Good story, and twists and turns that you don't expect. Sign me up.
Yep.
So then what would be your number 9?
So number 9, I put Eternal Sonata. That was on the PlayStation 3. Yes. That one is heavily tied to a composer, Frederick Chopin. He was I don't really know much about him other than, what they kind of told in the game, because that's, older composers isn't really something I'm into, but
yeah, I feel you.
It all kind of took place in, he was on his deathbed when the game starts, and it's all kind of a fantasy story that takes place in his head. So it has a really good story. The music in it is really good. The gameplay loop is very good. It's a little more action oriented, but still turn based. The battle system kind of works like you have a timer for each one of your turns, and as the timer ticks down, you can use certain number of attacks, abilities, whatever you can cram in to that timer. Okay. And then when the timer ends, it goes to the next character's turn or the enemy's turn.
Oh, that's
so the gameplay was fun. There was a light and dark system in the battle. So if, depending on whether or not you were standing in sunlight or in the shade, your abilities would change.
Oh, well, that's
and
cool.
And the enemies would change too. Some of them would take different forms in the various, light or dark. They would have different abilities. So it was pretty interesting.
So Eternal Sonata is one of those games that every time I was browsing the PS3 store, I would always see it and I'd be like, I should check that out. But at the time, I didn't have a job. I was a kid. So I didn't have a ton of money. So I couldn't just buy it because it looked interesting like I can nowadays. And it was one that when they released that they were closing down the PS3 store, which I think has happened. I think they finally did that. And everything was on sale and stupid cheap. I went on there and snagged that and a couple others. So I do have it on my PS3. And, being a musician and knowing, Chopin and things that he's done, like there's bands that I listen to that are metal bands that are inspired by that guy. And their solos and stuff. Yeah, I'll pop you over a song when we're done. Don't worry, there's no death metal growls or anything, she composed, it's this all female Japanese band called Love Bites, just to tell the listeners. And the guitarist is like this piano virtuoso who also is insanely good at guitar. And they wrote this whole song like in a dedication to that guy. And super, super good song, super good band. And anything that I've ever heard when it comes on and it's Chopin, I'm like, this is gorgeous. So an RPG based around his music and things like that just sounds so intriguing to me that it's one that I always have wanted to play. It's like I also want to check out Rhapsody, a musical adventure, because it's about music and I love music. That's like I can't get enough of it. So
yeah, that's pretty cool. Did you ever watch the TV show Lost?
Lost? I did not. But I remember it being a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, so there was one of the main characters' son, his son in that one, when they get towards the later seasons and he's a little older, I think it was his son, he was playing the piano and he was playing one of Chopin's pieces.
Oh, that's cool. And that would be like just like an Easter egg, I guess, for people who were just listening and being like, oh, dude, I know that.
Yeah.
That's rad.
So I was actually surprised to find out how popular he was, considering I had never, it's not like I said, it's not something that I really get into. But, I looked up a little bit more about him, obviously, after I played the game. And yeah, he had one of his songs came up on that show.
It's amazing to me that, and this works with video games, music, or anything. If you're not a fan of a certain genre, there are things that people think are world-stoppingly incredible in that genre that you will never know about,
Right.
And it's just, it goes back to just how much there is in the world to enjoy. And it circles all the way back to the theme of time and just having time to listen and see all these things and take it in.
Yep.
Well, you have sold me on 2 games so far that I have not played, my good sir. So you're doing a very good job. What is your number? I believe it's 8. Yeah, 8.
Yep, number 8. I don't think I'll have to sell you on this one because I'm pretty sure you're already a pretty big fan. But it's Kingdom Hearts 2.
Love Kingdom Hearts. Love them.
Yeah. So like I said, limiting it to 1 game per franchise. I wasn't as big of a fan of Kingdom Hearts 3 because I think the story is getting a little too hard to follow. But Kingdom Hearts, Chain of Memories, Kingdom Hearts 2, that storyline was real great. So I put Kingdom Hearts 2 on the list because I like that one the best. When they really, brought in Organization 13 and all of that. So
and the whole dual Keyblade mechanic that you could do when you got your meter up enough and stuff, dude. Like I haven't beaten Kingdom Hearts 3. Shocker, listeners, I know, but I've beaten 1 and 2. Chain of Memories, I have attempted a few times, and I am just not good at that game.
Yeah, it is definitely different.
Like the whole card system to attack, but it's not turn-based, and it's like I'm having to deal with all of this in real time. It almost makes me wonder if I should try to play the original version instead of like the 3Dized version that's in the collections, or how did you play it?
I think the original version would be harder. If you're already struggling with it, yes. that collection that came out with Chain of Memories tied to, I don't know if it was tied to Kingdom Hearts 1 or Kingdom Hearts 2.
It was.
I think that was a little bit easier.
Okay. So yeah, the collection that I have is 1.5, 2.5, Chain of Memories, and then like a video. And the other one's like
all released on PS3. Yeah,
I have it on PC, but yeah, it was all released on PS3 as well. Okay. And I believe they did it on PS4.
Yeah, I have the. I don't know if it's PS3 or PS4, but I have the collections on there as well. I do have the originals on PlayStation 2, and I've got Chain of Memories on the Game Boy Color.
Oh, see, I have the originals on PS2, but I don't have the Game Boy game. That's rad.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I played it. I did beat it on the original, the original version that came out. And obviously I was much younger, so it was a little more difficult at that age. But it was easier when it re-released on the collection. So if you're already struggling with it, then that would definitely be the version I stick with.
Okay.
Because you're not going to find it easier.
Fair enough. But so Kingdom Hearts 2, I remember diving into that for the first time and it being a very, like, almost like a tonal shift. Like, I feel like Kingdom Hearts 2 is a bit darker, and that was because it's, the Organization 13 coming in, and now you're starting to see that there's like more going on than meets the eye.
Yep.
And not only do you have the Heartless, now you have Nobodies. And a lot of people's complaint about Kingdom Hearts 2 is that opening section. Now, while I agree it's a little long, it helps build. It's character building. You know what I mean? It's building up be like, okay, so they want you to care about Roxas because that's going to come around and play heavily into the actual story. And that's what I always try to tell people. I'm like, dude, just get through that beginning section and the game opens up and it's fantastic. That's what I've been telling my buddies too. I'm like, when we get around to Kingdom Hearts 2 for the show for Steam Machine, because we did Kingdom Hearts 1 on there, I was like, the beginning section can be a bit of a slog if you get lost and stuff. I said, but
I will agree with that.
Streaming now on Peacock. Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie are back.
That's hot. Loves it.
For a show-stopping reunion that will prove putting on an opera is anything but simple.
We're really good at this.
One thing's for sure, they won't be upstaged.
Good to have you back. Come on, we've got a show to do.
Paris and Nicole, The Encore, a 3-part reunion special. Streaming now, only on Peacock.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be.
I was not a big fan of the opening.
Yeah, it's very long. It's longer than it needs to be. But once you get through that and the game opens up, Kingdom Hearts 2 is an incredible game.
It is.
And, going back to some of the worlds from the first one, but then seeing new worlds as well, having the new mechanics, that fight at the end with just enemies everywhere. It's a good time, man. Like, if you're listening to this and you haven't played Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, you really are doing yourself a disservice. You should go play them. They're a weird hybrid game, but they're good.
Yeah. Kingdom Hearts 2 is the only game on my list of 10 that is not a turn-based JRPG.
Even though it has a turn-based menu, it does not function as a turn-based game, which is always throws people off. It was like when we did Kingdom Hearts 1, like I said, for the Steam Machine, I remember Willie and Nate both being like, man, this attack thing is weird. But once they got used to it, they were like, I actually really like this. It flows really well. I'm like, yeah, it's weird to get used to, but once you do, you can master it and you can start whipping some butt.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I felt too, until you got to like the super bosses, like beating Sephiroth in the Kingdom Hearts games. That's something I was never able to do because I'm just not as good at action-oriented JRPGs.
Yeah. I think I beat Sephiroth one time, and it was because I had a game genie or something that I made myself not die.
Yeah, there you go. That's how hard it is.
Yeah, I just wanted to see what happened when you beat him, And
yeah, got to throw it on God mode.
Yeah, it was before I could just go on YouTube and look up what happens when you beat that boss,
Right?
It's like, I know this isn't a JRPG, but people don't, like, my friends don't understand. Oh, I guess my friends my age do, but like their kids and stuff. I'm like, no, we used to play through Mortal Kombat Trilogy on easy on the smallest tower just so we could put in a combination at the end for a cheat that would play a cutscene of all of the fatalities, brutalities, all of the finishers. And they're like, why didn't you just look it up on YouTube? I'm like, YouTube didn't exist, kid.
Right?
It wasn't.
Yeah, we had to do that the hard way.
Yeah. Oh, man.
And I know we were chatting a little bit about this before we started recording. Guidebooks.
Yeah. A thing of the past, and it bums me out because
when we were kids, if you didn't have a guidebook, you couldn't look up stuff online to go find stuff. You had to either buy the guide or find it yourself.
Yeah, for a long time. And then you started getting into the guides that you'd find on like GameFAQs.com that were very rudimentary, and people were using like ASCII to like make pictures and stuff. And then the guide would be, you just had to hope you got a good one. Whereas you could just back a few years before that, go to a store, get an official guide, and it's going to have everything you need to know.
Yeah. And that was hard to do too when we were kids, because you actually had to go to a store and find it. And, guidebooks, like, even though they made them, they weren't immensely popular. So, you had a few stores you knew you could check out and hope they had it. But I mean, it's not like you could find it as easily as you could find the games themselves. Yeah. But once we got older, Amazon became a thing. Getting guidebooks became so easy before they obviously stopped making them.
Yeah, and now we were having this conversation too, that they're super expensive. Like I had the Prima official Final Fantasy VIII guide, and it's somewhere here in a box. I can't find it anywhere, and it bums me out. So I was going to order another one, and that thing goes for like $80 to $90 now, and I was just like, well, never mind.
Yeah. When I played Final Fantasy VIII for the first time, I had a guidebook, but it was not the official Prima guide. It was a knockoff one, and it worked. It got the job done, but it wasn't until I, got a little older as an adult and, realized I could find this stuff on Amazon. I found the original Final Fantasy VIII Prima guide version, the one you're talking about, and I ordered it. I mean, it wasn't super expensive back at that time, so I paid, around normal price of what you would for a guidebook. I wouldn't be able to do that now, obviously.
Yeah, I think it was just going through COVID and everybody being at home and wanting the nostalgia of the old games and stuff to get them through it really spiked the price of everything retro.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And hopefully maybe now that that's calmed down some, it'll calm, the prices will calm down. But at the same time, people have learned that they can charge that much and people will pay it. So it's a weird slope.
One of the game series, it's not one of the ones on my list, but the Xenosaga games.
Yeah.
Finding those physically is super expensive, because that's one of the ones I don't think that they have re-released that for in any way, shape, or form other than the original PlayStation 2 physical versions, which I have. I've got all three of them. But if you try to find those now, I mean, you're going to pay probably $100 for each one, if not more.
Yeah, it's insane, man. That's like, and sometimes it's just like a random game. Like that, there's like a wrestling game with all chicks. I think it's called Rumble Roses. That game's super expensive. And it's like, why? It's not even like
right?
It's not even a fantastic game. I get that. I get it. It has cute girls in it and gamers be gaming. But like, why would you want to pay like, I don't remember the exact price, but let's say $250. It may be more than that. It may be less for that game. I mean, I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with, it's standard supply and demand. If it's one of those games that has not been re-released, like on, like a digital version where you can order it for cheap, then, people know that, hey, the only way I can buy this is to find a physical copy. And obviously they don't make them anymore. So people are charging. Yeah, I'm looking up on Amazon. Xenosaga Episode 3 on PlayStation 2. You want to take a guess?
Ooh, let's see. PlayStation 2 didn't get released out again. $135.86.
$341.33.
And I thought I was.
But hey, I could get it free delivered by Tuesday.
Man, that's one of those situations, I guess, where it's like you're a collector and you get to the point where it's like, all right, all the games that I have left are stupid expensive. Now you got to start dealing with that. And oh man, that hurts my wallet. And I'm not even trying to get those games. Yeah,
that game. I mean, it's sitting on my shelf downstairs. That might be one of the one of the ones that's worth the most. I don't know. I've never actually looked at any of them, because selling them off is not something I would ever do.
Yeah,
but
I'm the same way. I went through one day and I went through all my classic games that I can find, and the two that I have that are worth the most are Chrono Trigger for the DS and the original Phantasy Star for Sega Master System.
Oh, okay.
Like, those are the two. Like, all my other ones are like, nah, it's worth $10-$20. Nothing special. But those two, they're worth a decent amount. Now, I don't have the manual for the Sega Master System game. If I did, it would be worth a lot more. But even loose, it's worth more than you would think. Well,
speaking of being worth a lot on the original PlayStation 2 games, number 7 on my list is listed on Amazon for $106.42. Shadow Hearts Covenant.
Okay, so right off the bat, I believe it was in the JRPG Report Discord at some point. I said that, man, I want like a gothic JRPG. And I don't remember if it was you or Jordan, but someone was like, you should play Shadow Hearts.
I don't remember that either. It might have been Jordan, but I would 100% agree with that.
Yeah, so
the first two, so there's 3 games in the series. The first 2 are very tied together. Like the second one, which is Shadow Hearts Covenant, is a direct sequel to the first one. It has the same main protagonist, picks up right after the events of the first one, which I actually did not play the first one before playing the second one. I didn't know back when I picked it up that there was a game before it.
I have done that before.
Yeah, but I mean, the second one, both games were really good. I did end up picking up the first one and I played it. The first one is definitely older. You can tell just by the graphics that it is older. The second one is, much more modern looking, even though they're both on the PlayStation 2.
Yeah, but there was a big jump in that era of the way games started to look.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. But I mean, very dark storyline, very gothic. I mean, I don't know how spoilery we want to get into some of this stuff, especially if it's, something you're looking to try and find a gothic one. I don't want to spoil any of it, but
I mean, it's an old game.
It's not one of those. Yeah, it's not one of those happy-go-lucky games. I mean, characters die, but it's based on like the real world. So the events in Shadow Hearts Covenant, they take place during one of the wars that actually happened. Forget if it was World War I or World War II. But I mean, you actually visit like real cities during the events of the war, and kind of how your character, obviously, they put a fantasy twist on everything. But how your character shapes the events of, a lot of the stuff that goes on, and it's a lot of fun.
Dude, that sounds rad. It really does.
Yeah. Then awesome. there was a third game, Shadow Hearts from the New World or something like that. That one was not as good. It's more of a standalone, although it takes place in the same universe. I mean, the events that happened in the first 2 games are referenced. But the first 2 games, they take place across the pond, Europe, Japan, that kind of thing. From the New World, the third game takes place in the Americas, but it's a significant jump in time after the first 2. The first 2 are, take place a little farther back in history.
So
I think there's references to Al Capone in the third one. So, it's a little closer to present day.
So is it one of those situations? Is it one of those situations where it's like, if you really enjoyed 1 and 2, then check out 3, but don't start with 3? Yeah,
because if you start with 3, you'll be like, okay. I mean, you might like it because it's a solid game, but it's not one where it's going to be like, oh yeah, I really got to go back and play the others.
Okay.
The other ones are better. Specifically, Shadow Hearts Covenant.
I'll do what I typically do then and start with 1, because I usually figure that it can only age better from there, typically.
Yeah.
So,
and let me tell you, you start with 1, make sure you finish it.
Okay.
Because when you get to the end, that's what's really going to hook you. And then that's what, you're going to want to, if you're not going to start with Shadow Hearts 2, make sure you get to the end of 1. Because when you start up Shadow Hearts 2, you're going to get a lot more out of it, and why the main character is so much darker than he was in the original game. Even though in the original game he's a dark character, but you get a lot more out of it if you know what happened in the events of Shadow Hearts 1. And Shadow Hearts 2 actually has a good ending and a bad ending.
Oh, I love
which are vastly different from one another. Which again, I don't want to spoil it for you, but I would love to go back and talk about it after you play them.
Yeah, man, maybe that could be a Sunday special in the future.
There you go. And the combat in the game was really good too. It is turn-based, but they have what's called a judgment ring. It's all about timing. So if you select, you can do magic and stuff, but if you select like a basic attack, the judgment ring pops up, and it's a circle, spins clockwise, and you have to press the X button when the ring the ring that spins, when it hits each of the zones, and the more times you hit it in the zone, the stronger your attacks become. And then it's similar for magic too. You have to execute something similar when you're executing magic to get the magic attacks to go off.
Okay, so it's like
each battle you have to pay attention to.
So it's like a more fleshed out version of like pulling Squall's trigger when you swing to get a better hit. It's just a more complex version of that. Okay, I can get behind that.
Yes. So yeah, that one is a lot of fun, and it is probably the darkest storyline that I've got on my list, because typically JRPGs aren't that dark, but when you find one that is, it's a lot of fun.
I tell you, man, it's like when I played Tales of Berseria, I was not expecting that game to have the sadness in it that it did.
Right.
But it was, it all came around in the end, but it was just like, man, this is great stuff.
I'll tell you, when you're playing Shadow Hearts, it does not come around in the end. It stays dark the whole way through, and I think you'll love that.
I appreciate that. I was on a buddy of mine's podcast recently talking about the original Alien movie, and my argument with that is, like, I think that movie shouldn't have had a happy ending. I feel like the alien should have got her in that final ship, and that should have been the end of it. And they were all like, "Oh, you're crazy." I'm like, "Nah, man, it'd have been more impactful." But that's just me.
Right? Yeah, for sure.
So number 6, my good sir, what you got for me?
So number 6, I picked Star Ocean 2, the second story. This one is more tugging on the nostalgia. Actually, Star Ocean 2, if I remember correctly, was the first JRPG I ever played as a kid. Actually, this one's not turn-based either, so I take back what I said about Kingdom Hearts 2.
Yeah, it's got like its own fighting thing going on.
Yeah, but I really like the story. The dual protagonist thing, which they tried to recreate when they made the most recent Star Ocean release, but I think it was executed much better in Star Ocean: The Second Story.
This is an
older one. It doesn't hold up as well as some of the other ones on the list do. Even the re-release is the second Evolution that was put out.
Second Evolution R or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I did pick it up. I played it. I did not get all the way through it. This one of the older ones doesn't hold up as well, but the story's really good. You get to the 13 wise men. It's a lot like Kingdom Hearts 2 with Organization 13. I like games where, there's a group of antagonists that you're going after instead of just, facing Sephiroth around one bad guy.
Yeah. I agree with that because it adds more intrigue. It's kind of like in the the Trails games where you start finding out about Ouroboros and all of that.
Yes.
It's like,
yes, 100%. Yes.
Yeah, dude. That's when you start being like, I got goosebumps right now just thinking about that when that moment hit. The ending of first chapter, when it's just all of that's revealed to you, and it's just like, oh my god. So yeah, any game that has anything like that, I'm always for it. Star Ocean 2 is one of those games that I didn't have as a kid, but I always wanted to play it. So like I emulated it as I got older. I never beat it though. I would always fall off of it, and then I got the PSP version of it, and I played that some. And I didn't beat that either. And now I have the remake of it, which is beautiful. That art style that they chose, I adore it.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
But it's one that I'm saving to do on Steam Machine so I can dedicate time to it and actually play it,
Yeah.
Because like right now I'm playing Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous in the background while I'm playing other games. But like that game is easy to kind of dip in and out of. Whereas JRPGs, I feel like I need to invest in the story. And not all of them are like Dragon Quest XI, where you load your game and it tells you like, hey, this is what happened recently to refresh you.
Right. Yeah.
Especially those older games. They do not do that. So, but I remember just being intrigued by the way combat worked in Star Ocean and the whole, sci-fi, but yet still fantasy aspect to it. It's just very, very intriguing to me. I love it.
Yeah, that's something I really liked about the Star Ocean series as a whole as well. And that's something that I feel that they did keep going pretty solid the whole way through. Even the most recent release that came out for the PS5 has, a really well blended mix of sci-fi and fantasy. But Star Ocean 2, my favorite of the bunch. I like the characters the most. I know that they released a direct sequel to Star Ocean 2. It was called Blue Sphere. But that one was not released on consoles outside of Japan, so I've never gotten to play it. But it takes, it takes the story a little bit further with the main characters after the events of the game, whereas the rest of the Star Ocean games are a whole new set of characters.
Oh man, if I'm ever able to find like a fan translation of that or something, I'll pop it over to you. That way you can experience that, because I'm sure somebody translated it.
Probably.
But yeah, dude, the Star Ocean series is definitely one that like I have experience in. Like I don't have the nostalgia for them because I didn't get a chance to play them as a kid. But when I had Star Ocean 3, when they released that on PlayStation 3, man, I played the crap out of that game and just adored it. And that's what sparked me being like, I want to check out the earlier games. So I've dabbled in Star Ocean 1, Star Ocean 2. I played 5 on the PS4. Like it's just a very charming series.
Yeah, it does have a lot of good charm.
All right then, man. Number 5, we are halfway through.
Number 5, I went with Dragon Quest Monsters. So again, limiting it to one game per franchise instead of picking one of the mainline Dragon Quest entries, which actually I just beat the remake of Dragon Quest 3 last night. I went with Dragon Quest Monsters.
Now, what
Dragon Quest Monsters. Actually, the Dragon Quest Monsters was the first Dragon Quest game I ever played.
Oh, okay.
So
well,
before I ever got into any of the mainline numbered entries, I started with Dragon Quest Monsters. Had a guidebook for it too, and any of the monster catching games, Pokemon, anything like that, you got a guidebook for that. You can just sit and read that thing for hours.
Oh yes, sir. Yeah, I have and the old Pokemon, like were the ones where it was just like the Pokedex books.
Yep.
And I'm like, I still flip through those from time to time today.
Yeah.
Like they're great.
And the Dragon Quest Monsters one, it had that encyclopedia in the back and with recipes for making each of the monsters. And I mean, I would sit and I actually 100% beat that game. I made and collected every monster, including the most powerful boss family monster, which the only way to get them is to create every single other boss family monster and, breed them with other monsters. And as a kid, I was taking notes, I flipping through the guidebook is in pieces now. The pages are, the binding didn't hold together, but I still got every page. Yes. So I went with the original one, but they are all very good. Dragon Quest Monsters 2 had 2 different versions of it. One with a little boy protagonist, one with a little girl. That one was really good. And then I was so excited when they released the Dark Prince on the Nintendo Switch, because that's the first real Dragon Quest Monsters game that has been released.
My buddy Nate,
1 and 2.
He is a huge Dragon Quest fan. And when that game came out, he was very excited.
I was so pumped. And I played it. I beat it. It was really good. And it was nice, too, because, playing that one after having played a lot of the numbered entries, there were a lot of monsters in there that I had gotten to know, like, as characters from the numbered entries. Whereas playing the original Dragon Quest Monsters way back when, I didn't know who a lot of those people were. I just thought they were really cool.
Yeah, and now you have more context.
Right.
That's awesome.
So yeah, getting to make a party, breed them.
That takes me back to the making parties and breeding them and things. Not only Pokemon, doing that in Pokemon, but it makes me think of when me and my buddy Emmett growing up would put in Monster Rancher 2 in the PlayStation and then just go through every CD in my house trying to see what kind of monster.
Every single one. Yep, every single one.
Like I
remember that.
And I really appreciate
the Monster Rancher show. I watched that show as a kid. I really liked it. So I did pick up the games. I enjoyed that part of the games as well. but I did not enjoy the combat in those as much as I wish they would have done something a little bit different.
Yeah, if we did an episode about the re-release of them on the Steam machine, and all of us pretty much unanimously said, man, we love raising the monsters, but doing the battles is tedious.
Yeah.
But like I like how they in the remake they implement it, because I'm excited for the games to come back out, but I'm like, how are they going to do that CD thing? That's what I care about. How are they going to do? And they have some music there. It's linked to some big music database where you can just, like, I was typing in bands that didn't exist when the original game was out and getting stuff to pop up.
Well, that's really cool.
Which was just awesome. So if there are people out there who are on the fence about checking out those, that function is still there. So it's pretty cool. But man, you got me wanting to check out Dragon Quest Monsters. I do have a Switch. I don't play it as often as I used to, but I might have to see if I can snag a copy of that, the new one on Amazon or something for cheap.
I'm pretty sure you can get it off the eShop.
Oh, even better.
Yeah. So I am not into digital versions of games. I will buy the physical copies if they exist. And this one's relatively new, so you could probably find it for regular retail price. But if they are crazy expensive, it is on the eShop, I believe.
Yeah. I do love physical editions, just to have them. What bums me out these days is when I get a physical edition, like say of a Switch game, and I open it up and there's just a card in there. I'm like, yeah, well, that's cool. But like, so I ended up, like, when I first got my Switch,
want that booklet.
Exactly, dude. When I first got my Switch, I ordered, I guess it was a special edition of Ys 8, and I didn't realize it because it was the regular price. But I opened up my Ys 8 copy, and it had a booklet, it had a map, it had trading cards. I was like, what is this? I haven't seen this in years.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that cool?
So, like, kudos to companies who still do things like that, because it's very much appreciated.
Yeah.
Something that I wish would come back. Oh, go ahead.
Especially around, people our age, like, because we loved that stuff when we were kids, and now, unless you buy some special deluxe edition, you open it up and all you get is a card.
Yeah, and it's like
a game card.
I loved reading the booklet on the way home.
Yeah.
Like, all right. And now I guess kids just buy the game and then they just Google about the game before on their way home. But
right.
And one thing that older PC games did that I get is expensive, and something that I really wish would come back is cloth maps. Like, it would be a piece of cloth with the map on it. And it's like, that's not, because I have a map of Skyrim, it's a paper one, and it's torn in like 2 different places. You can't really tear a cloth map unless you're trying.
Right, yeah, unless you take scissors to it.
Yeah, so it's like, I miss those, man. I would love to buy a JRPG and open it up and to just have a beautiful cloth map of the world, or just like an art thing that you could hang up, but just like a nice little something. It would be nice. Well,
remind me when we get a little further up my list. When it comes to deluxe editions.
All right.
So maybe we could talk more about that.
And speaking of further up on your list, sir, what is your number 4? I believe, if I'm looking at your list correctly, my goodness, I can't talk. This is the one where you might commit a JRPG sin, correct?
Come to me.
Focus Features invites you to succumb to the darkness.
Nosferatu.
From director Robert Eggers comes a masterpiece of horror.
He is coming. This creature is a force more powerful than evil. It is death itself.
Nosferatu. Rated R. Under 17nm without parent. Only in theaters Christmas Day. Special engagements in Dolby and IMAX.
So, you want to be a marketer. It's easy. You just have to score a ton of leads and figure out a way to turn them all into customers. Plus, manage a dozen channels, write 1 million blogs, and launch 100 campaigns all at once. When that's done, simply make your socials go viral and bring in record profits. No sweat. Okay, fine. It's a lot of sweat. But with HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools, launching benchmark-breaking campaigns is easier than ever. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
Yeah, so number 4 on my list is Chrono Cross.
Yeah.
Have you ever played it?
I bought it when the new edition of it came out. I have not gotten around to it yet, but I want to play it because everyone seems to compare it to Trigger, and I want to go into it not doing that because I know better.
So I played Chrono Cross before I played Chrono Trigger. I didn't play Chrono Trigger until I was, probably in my mid to late 20s. But I played Chrono Cross as a kid, so that was my first step into that little world.
The Chrono world.
Yeah. So I realized that when Chrono Trigger came out, it was a huge deal. because it kind of, it was one of those games that kind of shaped the genre. But when I went back and played it for the first time, to me, it was just a very basic JRPG. It was good. Don't get me wrong. Story was good. Gameplay loop was good. But it was just very basic. And I feel that it is put up on this pedestal to where it's one of the greatest JRPGs of all time. And I'm like, really? It's good. It's good. Don't get me wrong. But it's just a generic JRPG.
Yeah, it wouldn't be in my top 10. And let me tell you another game that I feel that way about, that a lot of people take umbrage with, is Final Fantasy VI. I
could see that, yeah.
My thing with Final Fantasy VI was I did the Let's Play for the JRPG Patreon of it, and I ended up just dropping it because I wasn't having fun with the game. It was like nothing, I don't know. I don't know if
nothing was hooking you?
Yeah, it's just like, I thought Kefka was kind of cool, but it just seemed like everything bad kept happening to the players, and they were not really trying to do anything to fix it. I don't know. There was just a lot going on that I just didn't vibe with me like, say, 7 or 8 or 9 did.
Yeah, I could see that. 6, I never actually beat. I've, started up a couple times, but I always ended up putting it down.
Yeah, and I think it's just because I don't have the phone for it.
I get back to. Yeah, probably the same here.
But with Chrono Cross.
Yeah, getting back to Chrono Cross, that's one of the ones where, it's very heavily tied to elements. Like I said, I'm a big sucker for that. There's one thing that Chrono Cross does well that I don't like in JRPGs is they have so many characters that you can recruit as party members. Generally, I don't like that because they don't really flesh any of them out. They're all just kind of swap one in and out for the other.
So you're not like
not
a big Suikoden fan?
I've never played any of the Suikoden games.
Oh, okay.
No.
There's like 108 characters you can get in those games. So
yeah, I don't. I mean, they don't really flesh out a lot of the Chrono Cross characters. They do for some of them really well. And some of the, each one has its own little mini story. So it's not like they're just carbon copies of one another. And there are, differences enough between each ones to where you'll make a party based on some of those differences. But each character is tied to an element. There's 6 different ones: fire, water, things like that. But the story is really good. And one of the other things that I don't like in JRPGs that doesn't bother me as much with Chrono Cross is the silent protagonist. I hate that.
Yeah, I get that it's supposed to be like you can insert yourself in, but it's like, I really enjoyed The Witcher 3 playing as Geralt, and he talked. So
yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. Like, I don't want to insert myself as the main character. Like, I play these to escape into another world, and I want to be told a story, right? I don't want to insert myself as the protagonist.
100%.
So, but Chrono Cross does it really well, because the other characters, have plenty of things to say. So yeah, that's one. It's got a good combat system. Each character has their own element grid, and you can insert magic of each of the 6 different types into their element grid. And, as you progress through the game, defeat more bosses, your element grid expands. So it ends up being really, really a really large grid. And each element that you put in each specific slot, that magic attack can be used once per battle. So the more it expands, the more magic you can use throughout the battle. And then each character obviously has their physical attack that they can do. And then each one has 3 different tech skills that they can pick from, which is what really differentiates each character from one another.
Okay. So then you're going to be trying to build your party based around what they can do. Are you going to want to are you wanting to test everybody out? Or is it one of those things where you can kind of decide through how they act in the story, let's say?
So I would say definitely no to the story, because aside from maybe one character, the other ones, like they all speak. But if you were to swap out your other 2 party members with any of the other 2, like they'll all generally say the same thing. They may say it in different ways. They may use different accents.
Gotcha. So but they all serve the same purpose.
They all yes.
Okay.
So I would say and everybody's different, obviously, but for me, it would be based around the different tech skills that they have. And now I had a guidebook when I played, so I was able to read through and see, which characters had which tech skills. For me, every time I play the game, I always go through with the same 3 party members. You have your main protagonist, who you can't change out until you actually beat the game. But he's really good. So having him in, that's one spot. And then there's 2 others. The other 2, I always filled out with the same 2 characters. One, because he actually does have a little bit more of a fleshed out storyline, and he performs a dual tech skill with the main protagonist. And if you flesh out his storyline, he actually becomes one of the most powerful physical attackers in the game.
Always love.
And then the other one, I picked because he has one of his tech skills can steal items from the enemy.
That's
helpful. And in the later half of the game, you battle dragons, which each one is tied to a specific element, and you can steal a very useful piece of armor from each one of those dragons that protects you from the element that they use, which comes in very handy. So I would always pick that other character.
Yeah, that makes sense to me because I want all the items. Give me them all. What I've always heard about Chrono Cross from friends of mine in the Steam Machine Discord and stuff is that the music is incredible.
It does have really good music.
Like I've heard that the soundtrack is just tremendous. So that's one of the reasons I've been wanting to check it out too, is because I want to hear this beautiful music that people have told me about for years.
Yeah, it's very catchy and charming.
Well then, sir, we are to your top 3. So these are the major ones.
All right. So number 3, again, limiting it to 1 game per franchise. I went with Final Fantasy IX.
Oh man, sir, you accidentally hit 9 instead of 8.
So Final Fantasy VIII was my first Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, mine too.
I always put 8 above 7, and for the longest time, 8 was my favorite. But I ended up moving 9 ahead of it just because of how charming I find the main cast of characters and the story, particularly the way the story ends. It's I liked it better than 8. I love 8. Don't get me wrong. All the different Guardian forces going through that, like that was so cool, especially when I was a kid. And I do like that better than having, just the one summoner, or in the case of Final Fantasy IX, there's 2 of them, where all the summons are locked to. But I like the Guardian force thing in 8 a lot. But I find the characters in 9 so charming. I know there's a lot of rumors going around about Final Fantasy IX getting a remake. If they remake it, I hope they do not do what they're doing to Final Fantasy VII.
Oh, make it actiony?
Well, not only make it actiony, but I mean, what they've done with the story in Final Fantasy VII is so confusing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I've heard.
Is Zack alive? Is he dead? How many different timelines in this same universe are we going? Like, I don't have a clue what's going on. And this is something. This is Tetsuya Nomura at his finest. This is why Kingdom Hearts got to be too much. When they went into Kingdom Hearts 3, the storyline got so complicated.
Yeah, and the fact
same thing with Final Fantasy VII.
I feel like the fact that Kingdom Hearts decided to make every single game they ever make in the Kingdom Hearts franchise canon and have vital story information, like even the mobile game, like that was a wild choice.
That is so hard to do.
But yeah, I can.
So yeah, if they do remake 9, I hope they stay faithful to the original, make it 1 game. You do not have to flesh out. There was enough in 9 itself to where you could keep it without. I mean, making like Final Fantasy VII remake, make an entire game based around the Midgar section. Like, yeah, when I was a kid, it took me forever to get through Midgar, but I fired up Final Fantasy VII, the original, not that long ago. I mean, you can get in and out of Midgar in like 4 to 6 hours.
Yeah, it's not long.
It's not long. And it doesn't feel as long as the opening to Kingdom Hearts 2, I'll tell you that. But imagine remaking Kingdom Hearts 2 and having an entire game based around Roxas and his friends.
Yeah, there would be no need for it.
No, thank you. So if they do end up remaking 9, I hope they do. Like, they're coming out with a remake of Trails in the Sky, the first.
Yeah, I remember seeing something about that. And like,
so, they're building the game up from a whole new engine, but it's just Trails in the Sky, first chapter. Like it's the same game, new engine, same story. Like Falcom knows what they're doing. What Square Enix is doing to Final Fantasy VII, it hurts, man. It hurts.
Yeah, I remember, like, because I haven't played them, but I've played the original, and I remember listening to podcasts and seeing, YouTube videos and stuff talking about all of the things that were going on in Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I was like, what? Why?
Yeah.
And then the second one came
so unnecessary.
And it was just more of the same. Yeah, and it was like, all right. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd like to play them eventually just to see where it goes, but I think I'm going to wait until they're done with it.
Yeah, I get that.
But at the same time, I'm like,
I mean,
7 wasn't
what they're doing. Yeah, what they're doing with the storyline, like, and it seems like there's multiple timelines going on at the same time because Zack, like, you can actually play as Zack for a little bit in Rebirth. And it's, well, okay, he died before the events of Final Fantasy VII. So what's going on here? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all.
So everybody before Rebirth came out, because we all knew where Rebirth was going to end. Rebirth was going to end where Aerith died in the original game. So everyone was like, oh, are they going to kill her off this time? Or are they going to change it because Zack is alive? So are they going to do something different? Well, then you get to the end of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And, I was so confused by the story, trying to keep up with as best I can. You get to the end where Sephiroth comes slashing down with his giant sword. And when I was watching the cutscenes play out, I could have sworn that when he descended from above to stab Aerith, I could have sworn he missed, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going through the end of the game thinking, well, they did change it. Aerith is still alive. But then you see the events of the game conclude and every character is all sad because it seems like Aerith is gone. So I'm like, I beat this game and I don't really know if he died or not. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just dumb. I don't know. But I'm like, this Tetsuya Nomura, please stop it. If you're going to remake 9, keep him away from it.
Right? Like, leave Zidane alone. We want Steiner to be Steiner. We want Dagger to be Dagger.
Yes.
Like,
so, I mean, and there's enough story in Final Fantasy IX to where, you could flesh out the towns and, build Alexandria from the ground up and remake all the characters so that you can see them, full art 3D models and have the voice acting if you want. But, keep it to one game. Just don't give it the Final Fantasy VII treatment.
Yeah, because if they messed up Vivi in any way, I would be terribly upset.
Yeah, I hope I'm sure they will remake 9 at some point because why not, right? It's going to make them tons and tons of money.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But
go ahead.
Just don't ruin it, please.
I've always said that 8 is ripe for a remake because you can tell there are some things in 8 that kind of got rushed. And it's like, there's so many things that they could flesh out with the different gardens and the traveling on the world and all of that. There's a possibility for all of those older games, like 8, 9, and even 10 at this point could probably get a remake of sorts. But as long as there's no need to mess with perfection. And
I agree.
Those older games, it's kind of like when people were talking about, if going back to Chrono Trigger, if Chrono Trigger was going to get a remaster like they did with Trials of Mana or anything like that, or if they were going to do it the other way, I said, if they do Chrono Trigger, just have them do it HD 2D remake and put out the same game, but everything just looks prettier and people will eat it up.
Yeah, that's what they did with Dragon Quest 3.
Yeah, and people were eating it up. My buddy Nate was like,
it worked.
I'm not going to buy this. I'm not going to buy this. I'm going to wait. I bought it. He, like, within a day, he went from I'm going to wait, and then he bought it at the end of the day. It was tremendous.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, Final Fantasy.
So getting back to Final Fantasy IX, actually, James, when he was hosting the podcast, he would put out the music Sunday specials like you do.
Yeah.
I have saved on my podcast app the Sunday specials he put out for the music of Final Fantasy IX, and I listen to it all the time.
Dude, it's a great. All of those older Final Fantasy.
It is a great soundtrack.
But 9 in particular has such good music.
It's so good.
Yeah, I tell you, man, I've been having issues with those recently. Ever since Spotify bought Anchor, like when I would put out Sunday specials, they would just delete. And I didn't realize this for months. I had to put out like 3 or 4 of them, and they just weren't there. And I was like, what in the world? So I've had to start releasing those on Patreon, but I kept them free. So like anybody can go and listen to them.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that on the podcast.
Yeah, it was just such a bummer. I'm like, man, we got to mess with a good thing we had going here, Spotify.
Right.
But, you know, they are the audio overlords, so you got to do what you got to do. But dude, you're making me want to go back and play Final Fantasy now. I know a listener of the Steam Machine podcast, our buddy Jeff, he is always chomping at the bit for us to play 9. He's like, if you guys play 9, I want to guest on it. If you guys play 9, I want to guest on it. Whenever you play 9, I'm there. Don't you forget about me.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it, man. 9, it's such a great one. I mean, the art, like the artwork that they chose for the game, you know, like they went back to their roots after doing 7 and 8, you know, back to a more fantasy setting.
Yeah.
It holds up really well today. Just on the art style alone, it's just so charming. The main characters are interesting and likable. They each have such great fleshed out personalities. They're all so different from one another.
Yeah, I remember that distinctly. Is like all of the characters just seemed like I could be friends with them. Like they all had like a level of humanity to them, which I appreciated. Because sometimes, you know, you play games and the characters are so cold and they're just NPCs in a game.
Right.
You know?
They're just there.
Yeah. It's another thing when a game can really make you care about the characters. You know, Trails is good at that. You know, just really getting you invested in the people in the game, not just the story that's going on.
I agree 100%. Actually, speaking of Trails, that is my number 2.
Now, you got a lot to choose from in this series.
List. So, yeah, I told you when we were messaging back and forth about setting up a date and time to do this. If I hadn't limited my top 10 list to one game per franchise, other than my number 1 pick, which we'll get to in a little bit, every other game on this list would have been Trails.
I can't say I blame you. The ones I've played 2 of them, and they are 2 of the best JRPGs I've ever played, ever.
Yeah, I have played every one that has come out except for Sky the Third, because Sky the Third did not come. It only came out in the West on PC, and I don't play games on PC, so it's the only one that I have not played.
Ah, okay.
I grabbed Zero and Azure on Switch as soon as they hit the West. Was so pumped to see that they used the Geofront fan translation to localize those games. Well, because you know it took forever for those to come out here.
The funniest thing about that was that I went through and like it took me a while to find all the stuff I needed, but I finally had found like, you know, I got a Japanese copy of the game. I got the translation. I translated it and all of that. And like a month later, they announced it was coming to America, and I was like, well. All that time for nothing. But I learned things through the process of like implementing fan translations and stuff. So that was I'll take it as a win regardless. But yeah, I was very happy that they came out in an easier way for people to access. Yeah.
So the game that I chose for the top 10 list was Trails of Cold Steel 3.
All right.
And I mean, it's not any better or worse than any of the other Trails games. I just picked it because I would say probably because of the timing of when I played it, as opposed to the other Trails games. Trails of Cold Steel 3 was what really got me hooked into the lore of the entire series. I played Sky the First, I played Second Chapter. I was one of the ones who had to wait years for that cliffhanger to see what happened after the end of that cliffhanger and at the end of Sky First Chapter.
Absolutely brutal. It would have killed me.
Yeah. And then obviously never got to play Zero and Azure because they didn't come out here until recently. Then I played Cold Steel 1. I played Cold Steel 2. I really liked them. But then Cold Steel 3 came out, and getting to play as Reen as an instructor instead of a student, having students of your own, and then seeing each original member from Cold Steel 1 and 2 cycle in and out of the story as the game progressed. It hit so many feels going through that game. That's why I chose that game for this list over any of the other ones.
And I feel like that series is very good at that, about weaving characters in and out.
It is. Yeah.
There's characters in well, I guess we've both played them, so we can talk about it. So like in the first chapter and second chapter, I always called him Olivier. I don't know how. Olivier or whatever.
Olivier, yeah.
Even after second chapter, I'm still like, what's going on with you, mother? Oh, I can't cuss on the show. What's going on with you, man? What's going on? Like, I am so.
So, do you know who he is?
I know he's like a prince. I remember at the end of second chapter, it was like he's actually in charge of like a rival country or something along those lines. Because I remember it being like, next time we meet, it'll be on the battlefield. And it's like, whoa.
So the Cold Steel arc takes place in Erebonia. He is the Erebonian prince.
Oh man, I just got goosebumps.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that game took place over in Erebonia. That's
yeah,
intriguing.
I'll tell you, you are missing out on so much by not having played through that entire series.
Oh, sounds like I'm going to have to just play him in the background. Oh man. Yeah. And I still want to get through the third, and I want to get through the Crossbell arc before I get to Cold Steel. But man, part of me just wants to start playing Cold Steel.
Yeah, the Cold Steel arc, it all takes place in the Erebonian Empire. At least the first two games do. The third game, you do visit Crossbell, and the fourth game, you go back into Crossbell again.
Now it's the fourth game where Estelle pops back up, right?
So she appears in the Crossbell arc, her and Joshua.
Oh, okay.
And yes, they do come back in Cold Steel 4. In Cold Steel 4, everybody comes back.
Oh, I love that. I love the sound of that.
Yes. I mean, in Cold Steel 4, like there are so many playable characters. It's not as many as in Reverie, because Reverie is kind of like a love letter to fans that, ties up everything from the storylines of Estelle and Joshua, Lloyd and his buddies in the Crossbell arc, and then Reen and friends in the Cold Steel arc.
Now, is that the last game of that story? Are they starting something new, or is it just kind of like a love letter that's going to continue?
I wouldn't say they're starting something new. So when you get to Calvard with Trails Through Daybreak, yes, you can, as just a casual gamer, you can start there. But again, would not recommend it.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get so much more out of it by having played all the other games in the franchise. So it is a continuation of a very long story, but it is its own separate arc. So, the Sky games, that's the Liberal arc. The Crossbell games, obviously Crossbell arc.
Yeah. And
then Cold Steel 1 through 4 is the Erebonian arc. And then Trails into Reverie is kind of like a send-off for the Crossbell and Cold Steel arc.
It's the Avengers Endgame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get into Trails Through Daybreak. That is the Calvard arc.
And that's the newest game.
You don't know. Yeah. That's the newest game that has been localized.
America, yeah.
Yeah. Trails Through Daybreak 2, which comes out in about 2 months from now. That's the second one. And then the third one, which is Kai no Kiseki, which they have not localized yet. That literally just came out in Japan, I think, in like September.
Okay, so that's still going strong.
Yeah, I believe that is the third and final game in the Calvert arc, but I'm not 100% sure because I don't look too heavily into the news for the new games that come out because I don't want spoilers.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And when I'm trying to read about the games that are still in Japan that haven't come over here yet, I always try to, like, if there's something that seems spoilery to me, I will just read over it and not include it.
I mean, you definitely take the bullet for us by reading that full article.
Yeah.
Because just seeing images is a massive spoiler.
Yeah, and what blows my mind is sometimes that it's almost like the people who write the article don't think about that, or they just don't care. One of the two, but they'll include some screenshots that it's like, oh man, maybe you shouldn't have put that in there.
Yeah.
The wrongs we must right. The fights we must win. The future we must secure together for our nation. This is what's in front of us. This determines what's next for all of us. We are Marines. We were made for this.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
But yeah, I mean, as a fan of JRPGs, the Trails games, it is the best JRPG series, hands down, and it's not close because it's not like the Final Fantasy series where each game is a standalone. Like, this is one long story. Falcom does such a great job of making you care about the world, and they put so much effort into the NPC dialogue. That's why the games took so long to localize, is because of how heavy the script was.
Oh yeah, dude, some of those
because every NPC has something different to say after every major event.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
And it's all interesting.
It was always so cool in the Trails in the Sky games to, like, when you revisited a town after something happened, to go around and just talk to everybody because they all had something new to say. And even for a game back then, that's pretty mind blowing. The attention to detail.
Yeah. I mean, if you make a point to go back through, like when you get to Cold Steel 3 and beyond, if you make a point to go back through and talk to all the NPCs after every major story event, the first time I played Cold Steel 3, it took me almost 100 hours to get through. And I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, see, I'm one of those people that I love a good long game because I can invest more into it.
Yeah.
I don't get me wrong. Like, if I play a game that's really, really good, but it's 8 hours, I enjoyed it, but is it going to stick with me? Whereas it's like playing a game that took me 100 hours to beat, whereas I've taken in all of this world and the characters and the information, the stories, it sticks with me a lot more.
Yeah, you remember it.
Yeah, and not to mention...
I mean,
No, go ahead.
So the couple times I was on the podcast before with James, I think we did a deep dive into Cold Steel 3 and 4. So I think I was on twice. And I think that's what we did. I beat the games, like I played them and went through them right after they came out. And for James, it took him a little longer to beat them. But I was able to go back and remember things that happened because I spent so much time invested in this long game. Whereas if you just went and played through Rebirth and you said, hey, let's do a deep dive into Rebirth, I'd be like, dude, I can't.
Yeah.
I don't remember any of it. I don't remember any of it. But the Trails games, I mean, I can, that stuff sticks with you because they make such an effort into making you care about it. If you're willing to put in the time, you're going to get so much out of it. And then seeing how each one of these, little miniature storylines, how they progress throughout, what are we up to, like 11 games now?
Something along those lines, yeah.
Yeah, if it's something that you can get into, I mean, I could not recommend it any higher.
And what I say to people is two things. One, and this goes back to me being the musician, the music in the Trails games that I've played has been incredible. And it's always so on point for what they're trying to get across.
I told you I had the Final Fantasy IX soundtrack episode report saved.
Yeah.
I've also got the Cold Steel 3 and Cold Steel 4 soundtrack episodes saved on my podcast list.
Nice.
And I listen to them all the time.
But
if I don't have a podcast to listen to, like a JRPG report or any of the other podcasts I listen, like if I'm all caught up, I'll throw on the soundtrack on my way, on my commute to and from work, and just listen to them because I love them.
And that's one of the key signs of a really good soundtrack is when you listen to it away from the game and still get as much enjoyment out of it.
Yeah.
The other thing I tell people with the Trails series, I'm like, it seems daunting. I get that. There's a lot of games. Play through Trails in the Sky first chapter, beat that game, see the ending to that game, and then decide if you want to play the rest of them or not, because that is a pivotal ending where it's like, if you don't care about the game, you're not going to want to go on. But if you cared a little bit and you see the ending of that, you're like, oh, okay, its claws are fully in me now.
It's the same with the ending to Cold Steel 3, my good sir.
Oh, I can't wait.
It is. I mean, the way that game ends, it just cuts to black right after this climactic event, which I won't spoil, but it is so good.
Go Sopranos.
So good. Yeah, it is so good.
I love an ending like that too, though, because it's like all of a sudden it's just, wait, what? And then you're left to just sit with it
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. And, it's not like when, like I said, when I played first chapter, I was one of those who had to wait years to find out what happened. But way back then, the Trail series was much smaller. You didn't know if you were ever going to get to see what happened. You didn't know if it was going to be a big enough success to where they were going to release second chapter. And it took them forever to do so. And there were a lot of reasons why. Now, you don't have to worry about that. The Trail series has taken a big enough hold in the West, and you can tell by how much more effort they're putting into getting the games localized faster. I mean, Daybreak just came out not that long ago, and within a year, we're getting Daybreak 2.
Yeah, that's
the Crossbell games. Like, they took forever to come over here, but when they finally localized them, it was less than a year between Zero and Azure. And now they're doing a remake of Sky, and they haven't confirmed second chapter, but there's no way they don't do that.
Yeah, and I would even like to see them do third chapter, since third chapter never got a wide release other than PC. That would be a great.
Yeah, and that'll probably be the first time I'm actually able to play Sky the Third.
And people tell me, like, when I first started getting into Trails, I would read online. People will say, "Oh, you can skip the third game if you want." And I think even James told me that. But after playing second chapter and getting to know the character that I know is the main character of the third game, I'm like, how could I skip this? If I own it, how could I skip it?
Probably so I would say out of all the Trails games, it is the most skippable. So let me start over. So I don't know if it was before Cold Steel 4 or before Reverie, but there's a YouTuber named Lady Virgilia who did deep dives into a bunch of different Trails games. And because I never got to play Sky the Third, I never got to play Zero, I never got to play Azure, I went and looked at all of her deep dive videos into each one of those games so I could be caught up on the storyline before the most recent release came out, because I knew how much I would be missing out on if I had never played the Crossbell game.
Oh, yeah, and the fact that you didn't have access to those games, and that's the only way you can get that information.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, again, I have not played Sky the Third, but I do know a lot of the game is based around the Star Doors. That's what they call them in the game. And it's like little clips of story that if you don't have access to the game, you can look up videos online and be able to find out what you're missing. Because from what I understand, it's just Sky the Third is just a super long dungeon. And other than checking out all the different Star Doors, it's just basically like a dungeon crawl.
Huh.
At least from what I understand. Now, I could be totally wrong, but I would say if you have access to it, don't skip it. I can't wait to be able to play it for the first time. But it is one of the ones where you could get the information that you're missing from that game much easier than you could any of the other ones.
Okay. Well, man, that's a really strong number 2, sir. So that just makes me wonder, like, what could you possibly have at number 1?
This episode is brought to you by Skinny Pop Popcorn. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Oh, so light and crunchy. Skinny Pop Original Popcorn is the snack you've been searching for. Made with just 3 simple ingredients: popcorn kernels, sunflower oil, and salt. Snacking never felt or tasted so good. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Give yourself permission to snack and pick up Skinny Pop Original Popcorn today.
Number 1 for me is The Legend of Dragoon.
Okay. One of my best friend Dustin's favorite games when we were growing up.
Yeah. So this is one that I played probably in my mid-teens. It's locked to the PlayStation 1. They have released it on, like the PlayStation Store, so you can download it and play it on modern consoles, but it's the same game. Like there's no tweaks to it. Like you are playing the original PS1 game. But it's one of the ones where it's got the element system that I really like. The story is incredible. It's one of those ones where I wish one day it would get the treatment that so many other games these days are getting.
And it had a really, really interesting combat system too, didn't it?
Yeah. So the combat system, in that game, it was called Additions. I talked about the Judgment Ring when we talked about Shadow Hearts Covenant.
Yeah.
So that one was all about timing, right? Legend of Dragoon it's essentially the same thing. It takes place during your attack, not before the attack goes off, but you really have to pay attention to the screen, and it's something you have to be able to master, because if you aren't able to pick it up, you're not going to get anywhere in the game.
And
so it's a skill you need to learn to develop.
I remember friends of mine trying to emulate that game, and it's like notoriously hard to emulate because the timing that you need is off in emulation, so that it just makes that game almost impossible to get anywhere.
Really? I didn't know that.
It might be better now, but this was, years ago when emulation hadn't come quite as far, and they were like, oh yeah, it's like there's just milliseconds off. You know what I mean? Just delay.
Yeah. In this game, that would make the difference.
Yeah, and so specifically my buddy Fenris was very, very happy when it got released on PS4, and he didn't have to try to deal with emulation anymore. He could just go play it on his PlayStation.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, the story in that game is so good. And there's a huge potential for a prequel. If you play that game, and you'll know what I'm talking about, because your party, they all, each one inherits a different elemental dragon spirit. There is a whole storyline that took place a generation ago where each one of these dragon spirits was owned by another character, most of whom are not in this game, but there are references to some of them. That is just ripe for a prequel to where you could flesh that story out 100%.
Oh, dude, they could call it Origin of Dragoon.
Yeah, and I really wish that's something they would have done. It's probably too late to do that now. If they were going to revisit this IP nowadays, they would probably start by remaking the original, which I hope they do. And I hope that, if they end up doing that they decide to make a prequel. Or even a sequel. I mean, whatever. But give this game the love that it deserves. I mean, there's fan petitions online. I actually signed one to get them to give some love to this game.
I remember, one of the things that didn't do this game a service was that it was referred to as the Final Fantasy VII killer. And people,
I never heard that.
People kind of judged it for that. Yeah, it was like a thing in this magazines back in the day where they would refer to, is this game going to be the Final Fantasy VII killer and things like that. And it was all hype, you know what I mean? And I think it negatively affected the game because people were comparing it to Final Fantasy, where it was its own thing completely.
And I think you're right. It was its own thing completely. And I think that's part of the reason why it hasn't gotten any of the love that a lot of these other JRPGs have. This game was made by Sony, so it wasn't made by, one of these other, it wasn't made by Falcom or Square Enix or one of these other giant entities. It's a Sony game, and in my opinion, they knocked it out of the park. But it's not like one of these other studios who, are going back to their older games and either giving them these HD remasters or remaking them completely. So this one, I think that's why this one is kind of, stuck out there. And I really hope somebody goes back to it and revives it. But I think this is one of the ones that could be left out in the cold.
It could be done. And there's enough nostalgia for it with people that I think it would print money. And that's one thing that I don't understand. I do too. With some of these things where it's like, why haven't they remade this? It would literally print money. Or like PlayStation exclusives. Once the PlayStation exclusivity is up, they still don't bring it to PC. And I'm like, dude, do you understand how many PC players don't own a PlayStation that want to play those games? You will print money.
Yeah. And I mean, I understand that remaking a game or even doing a remaster, you have to put a little bit more money into the IP in order to get that done. But being able to release a PlayStation game on PC or Xbox, I don't play games on PC or Xbox, so it doesn't matter to me. But just selling the rights to be able to do that, I mean, how much is it costing you to allow that to happen? That's just free money.
It really is free money. Other than they can say, oh, you can only play this on our console. I feel like that's it. It's they just want that exclusivity, so maybe more people will buy a PlayStation. But at the same time, it's okay, so you're going to want people to buy PlayStation. Well, your PlayStation is $600. There's a significantly less amount of people who can afford $600 that could afford a $60 game, literally 10% of that price of your PlayStation, on a computer or an Xbox, and you're going to get exponentially more purchases that way. So
yeah, and I mean, I don't know enough about publishers, developers, all that kind of stuff. But that's one of the things that I don't understand. Like, I know Nintendo makes their own games, so I can understand why they keep theirs locked to the Switch. But Sony, I mean, they did make Legend of Dragoon, but it's Square Enix who's making a lot of these games, right? Not Sony, not Microsoft. So I could understand why, okay, Square Enix makes Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's a PS exclusive, but it's only a PS exclusive for a certain amount of time because Sony is paying them for that.
And I think
but when that contract ends, it's easy for Square Enix to say, okay, here you go, PC, here you go, Xbox. And that's what they're going to do.
And I think that's a lot better these days than it was, back in our day, where it was like if a game came out for one and it was an exclusive, it was probably always going to be an exclusive.
Right.
Like it was always nice when, like I was fortunate enough at one point to have a PS2 and an Xbox. And it was nice to be able to play both of those. But there were definitely games, like there's a game just popping into my mind for my original Xbox that I played called Amped 2. It was a snowboarding game. But you could get a skateboard with a ski on the bottom of it and skateboard down the mountain. And it was super cool. That game has never, ever come out, gotten a sequel or anything like that on anything other than that original Xbox. I don't even think it's available on the newer Xboxes for the Xbox store. So it's like that was never came out for PlayStation 2.
Got left behind.
Yeah, it just got left in the dust. And I really hope that doesn't happen with something like Legend of Dragoon. But the fact that they put it up for people to buy on the newer PlayStation consoles is at least like a little better than nothing.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I wish it would get the treatment that some of the, I mean, I would be fine with like an HD remaster, like, or something that they did with Dragon Quest 3. Like I don't necessarily want them to do the whole Final Fantasy VII remake thing. But I think Legend of Dragoon is small enough to where you could get a fully fledged PlayStation 5 size game out of what is already there and not spread it out over multiple games or anything like that. But, it was 4 discs back in the day. That seemed like a lot back then, but file size wise, that's probably nothing compared to what they do now.
I was going to say, it's funny looking back at those games and thinking like this came out on 4 discs because it had CG cutscenes. If it didn't have that, it might have been 2, if that.
Right. And I still have the original PlayStation version. I did download the version that came out, on the PlayStation Store because it's easier to do that than whip out my old PS1, which probably doesn't even work anymore.
Yeah, right. Got to sit it upside down with something heavy on it.
Yeah. I remember those days. But yeah, I hope that game gets, that would be a day one purchase for me. In whatever shape or form that they would do that. The story was so good, the characters, the combat. There's not a negative part in that game. So for me, that's what puts it number one on my list.
Hey man, and there's no arguing that because anybody that I know that has played that game has said it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I love it from start to finish.
Well, Jake, sir, thank you very much. You are the inaugural interviewee for the JRPG Report Sunday Special JRPG Top 10, and that is a solid top 10 list to start off with, man. I appreciate you very much.
I appreciate you having me on. It was a lot of fun. Before we got together to do this, I went downstairs in my collection and looked over all the games that I had, trying to make sure I wasn't leaving anything out. There's a couple that I ended up putting on my list just because I was going through some old stuff and saw, oh yeah, I remember, it's been a while since I played this one, but it deserves to be on here. It was a lot of fun preparing for it. It was a lot of fun to be able to talk about it. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you very much for joining me. And we'll get together and talk again sometime, maybe about some games in specifics.
That'd be a lot of fun. Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. Let me know when you get caught up on the Trail series. He probably got about 600 or 700 hours to put in before he get all the way current, but he better get started.
I might install and play one of those tonight just to get myself going.
There you go.
But yeah, man, thank you again for joining us. And to everyone listening, thank you for listening to the JRPG Report Sunday special. I'm going to try to make these a little more often, especially like with the news being as slow as it has been lately. But I'm doing my best. I love you all. And do me like the biggest absolute favor that you could ever do in the entire world. And that is get back out there and level up.